Garrett Carlick here, and we are at NATSO 2010 Las Vegas, Nevada, joined by the president of NATSO, Lisa Mullings. How are you, Lisa?
Great. It's good to be here.
Good to see you once again. And the chairman is here with us as well, Scott Paulson. Scott, how are you?
Good, doing great.
Scott, thank you so much for your time as well. Let's talk about some issues going on here, Lisa. First of all, in recent weeks, we've seen a handful of reports indicating that several states are looking to commercialize their rest areas. This is a big concern for the industry. Can you give us an update on this issue? Where are we? And why is this negative for the trucking industry?
Oh, this is definitely negative for the trucking industry for a lot of reasons, but the primary one being that commercialized rest areas actually won't increase the amount of parking for drivers.
Right.
We took a look at actually about 14 different states that do have commercialized rest areas, and most of those states, in fact all but one, have fewer parking spaces along the commercialized routes.
Wow,
than
that's
the non.
interesting.
Yes, and in some cases it's significant. And so what we think is that because the commercialized rest areas are so difficult to compete with, that there's not enough commercial development on the exit ramps and therefore less parking.
Right. It kind of creates a monopoly kind of situation in that area, Scott. So what is it that drivers can do to support NATSO, get involved here, and fight the commercialization of these truck stops or these rest areas?
Well, again, just through the ATA and the other various organizations that they belong to, is do everything they can to stay up on the issue and see how to mobilize within their association and be a force.
Yeah, and they should be concerned. Lisa, you made some really great points here that we already kind of have a model for this. We're seeing what is happening, so the law of unintended consequences is already at play here, and I think drivers should be concerned.
Yeah, and the challenging part, especially for me, is that the states really don't want to invest in too much parking.
Yeah.
They want to be able to make some money on these rest areas, and so they're using this issue of safety to hit this issue home, and I don't think it's right, because these states have an obligation to keep their interstate safe.
Yeah.
They should be keeping these rest areas open.
Yes.
It's important, and it's not a lot of money for them compared to their overall state transportation budgets.
Right.
It's a drop in the bucket. They're using this as an excuse to try to make money on the rest areas.
Right. In fact, we saw some rest areas in a couple of states shut down, Scott, but they quickly reversed that because they realized what real demand there was for that. And again, as Lisa points out, that it's a minimal maintenance cost for these states. So it was not far after they announced the closing of some of these rest areas in these states that they came back and said, no, we're going to reopen them. I think that's an important note here in this equation.
Yeah, it sure is, and it's just so vital to the whole interstate system that we run under the rules that were established some 60 years ago.
Right.
That's why it's against the law to have commercialization right now. But you're right. We have to keep those open, as well as let us that do this job the best. We have the most parking areas or spaces.
Yeah.
We have all the services there. And to cut our legs out from under us, under this short-term gain of a little bit of money up front, is just almost criminal.
Right. And Lisa, this is kin to the tolling of interstates, which we highly oppose on our program as well, in that tax dollars have gone to build these rest areas and maintain these. We are paying for these rest areas. We have already paid for these rest areas, and there was a spirit of, again, let's have these public rest areas, and the key word is public there, for people and drivers to stop and get some rest and then move on. That completely changes with the commercialization of these rest areas.
That's right. In fact, some years ago, when we were learning more about the Maryland House and the Chesapeake House on I-95, obviously in Maryland, we met with some folks from Maryland, and they told us that they were trying to keep the trucks out of the rest areas there because the trucks take up a lot of space, and they could make more money on the four-wheeler traffic. So, that was something that the Maryland Trucking Association fought and won, obviously.
Scott, let's talk about how the commercialization of these rest areas would affect business. There's something to know there, too.
Well, there is, and we have a truck stop in Arizona out on I-10, and it seems like it's probably not exactly every other rest area, but they've started shutting their rest areas down.
Right.
So an example would be is if the one that happens to be closed closest to me, which is about 5 miles east of our truck stop, if that was suddenly commercialized and just cut off, it would cut us off at the knees. We would just be, all of our volumes and revenues would drop. They'd have the position A, easy on, easy off.
Sure.
And it just is. I mean, it's unfair.
Yeah.
It's so unfair that it would really put us at a disadvantage.
And like you stated just a few minutes ago, this is not something that we haven't tried, that we need to experiment with.
Right.
Because we do have these facilities, and we do know that there are 50% fewer businesses in counties with commercialized rest areas.
Right.
There are fewer restaurants, there are fewer truck stops, there are fewer gas stations and convenience stores. So we already know what this does to business. We know what it does to jobs.
Right.
And we know what it does to driver choice as well.
Okay, and that's a good point, too, because the driver choice here is depleted. Also, the amenities, what drivers really not only desire but need for their operations goes away, because the commercialization of these rest areas does not mean that those points are going to be able to serve the drivers as our truck stops do.
That's entirely right. And in fact, we even took a look at, along one commercialized roadway, what the prices and what the choices were, and the prices were substantially higher at the commercialized rest areas.
Yeah, it's interesting.